Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to Chillin With Chillot. My name is TJ Chillot, play-by-play broadcaster, and through my many years of working in hockey in several different leagues all across the United States, I have met some incredible people who have even better stories. Today, we've got somebody in studio with me, a good friend of mine from the Charlotte Checkers, the assistant equipment manager, Eric Cosentino. And Eric, when I got the idea to do this podcast and there were people going through my mind who I wanted to have on, you were absolutely at the top of the list because there are so many stories with you. And I want to just start at the very beginning. Let's go with the boring, the concrete. How did you get started in hockey? How did you become an equipment manager?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me on, and what an
You're
intro,
welcome.
like way to pump my tires. I grew up I was always into hockey, like partially it's my mom got me into it. Like the reason my name's Eric is because she was a diehard Eric Lindros fan. Like I used to call her the Eric Lindros stalker because she knew what car he drove because her friend's dad sold him the car. So partially that's why my name's Eric. So I grew up a hockey kid, like going to Philadelphia Phantoms games and Flyers games and stuff like that. And then living in Texas, there's no hockey. And then we moved back to Maryland, and I kind of got a little bit more into it. Not too much. It was more kind of going into middle school, high school that I was more into it. And then I played 4 years in high school for the Washington County North Stars. Not like a big thing.
What position did you play?
Forward.
All right.
Yeah.
I imagined you as a defenseman.
No.
I don't know why. But
I don't know why either. I'm a short, stocky person. I'm not a tall guy.
Usually in high school, they put the worst kids on defense. Maybe that's
that's a fair point. I mean, I sat bench most of the time, and I mean, granted, sitting bench when you have 12 people on a team, it's kind of saying a lot about your skill level. But then what kind of got me into it was I was going to Norwich University in Vermont, and I was doing the Corps of Cadets because I wanted to go in the military. I was majoring in history because I'm a huge history buff, and at the time, that's what I thought I wanted to do. Like it was, I'll go to the military, go in the Army, join the military police, and then after that, maybe go work at the national parks as like a cop, that kind of thing. And then I actually give all credit to my dad on getting me into hockey because we were sitting the one day and he was like, hey, like they had a Division III hockey team. I'm like, yeah, like I want to go to a bunch of games. He's like, why don't you reach out to them and like see if you can like work with them as like a student manager? And I'm like, it's not a bad idea. He's like, yeah, like my buddy at Notre Dame did it for their football team, and when they won a national championship, he got a ring. And I'm like, not a half bad idea. So I reached out to the assistant coach, Steve Matson, who I still talk to this day.
Not surprised. We'll get into your relationship.
Still talk to that guy to this day. But so I did that, and I was one of three. So it was 2 juniors and then myself. So as a freshman, like in Norwich, you're a rook. So you don't really have any, you don't really get anything. You don't have your phone, you have no rights, you have no privileges. Like you got 1 10-minute phone call a week to call somebody. So the hockey was kind of my break from all of the Corps of Cadets junk that you had to kind of deal with, and the stress of being a freshman in college and being 12 hours away from home, not being able to call your parents every single day of the week. Like that was that hour I'd spend at the rink every day after classes, that was like my break, and being around with the players and building relationships with the players. And I went home for Christmas. Well, I went home for Thanksgiving for a week, and it wasn't that much time for me to really like sit and think. And then when I came home for Christmas, I was home for like a month. And I was at my Civil War reenactments group's meeting for the year. I'm not trying to jump ahead here. It's just telling the story. I was at their meeting that we had every year, and I was there, and I was with all of them, and I'd been with my family, and I was like, I don't want to go back. I was like, I'm not happy there. I don't want to do it anymore. So then I sat down with my parents and I was like, hey, I don't want to go back to Norwich. And they were perfectly okay with it.
Because that's a hard decision to make. I mean, you're making life-altering decisions.
Yeah.
There. How many kids have gone home for a winter break or a summer break and then just decided I don't want to go back, but ultimately do go back because they're terrified of making the actual change?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm not a school person.
Right.
I never was. Like, I did all right in high school, but
not
then,
either.
Yeah, like, and then like they all, like, everyone in my high school was like, oh, go to the community college, like you'll do better there. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like it was more of like I wanted to prove them wrong.
I get it.
And I kind of did, but I mean, when you get a D- in military science, that's kind of your wake up call of, hey, the military's not for you.
I went through the same thing when I was in community college. I thought I wanted to be an architect, and when you get a D- in one of the core classes, you're like, yeah, maybe I should have thought this through. I really don't like math to begin with. Why am I doing this? But how did that then translate into? So your dad kind of pushes you and says, ask the coach, and
I did that, and that was like my favorite thing in Norwich. Like I loved working for the team, but I was like, I don't want to go $50,000 in debt for a hockey team that I don't even play for.
Right.
So then the agreement I made with my parents is that I was going to go back to community college. So I did that. The community college I went to in Hagerstown, they didn't have a sports management. So I did health and phys ed, which I ended up changing because they were making me take like an athletic training class. And I'm like, I don't need this.
Yeah, it's not going to match up.
Yeah. So I ended up just switching it to general studies with like a letter of recommendation for management. But so I worked for a single A baseball team selling tickets to try to get into the clubhouse position at some point if hockey didn't work out.
Okay.
And in that summer, I reached out to every single team possible, like the Capitals, the Bears, like Reading Royals. I reached out to everybody that was around me, just saying, "Hey, this is who I am. I want to get into hockey. What can I do?" And the Reading Royals, my former boss, Jason Jaybird McDonald, shout out to him. He gave me a look, and he emailed me and called me and was like, "Hey, like I'm actually looking for like a visiting room part-time person.
Okay.
Like what's your deal?" And we talked, and I was like, he's like, "You're like, where do you live?" I'm like, "I'm like 2 hours away." And he's like, "Why are you reaching out?" I'm like, "Because I want to get into hockey. Like I want to do this."
So you were fine with the 2 hours?
I was.
And for people who might not be hockey people, like explain what just a visiting room attendant does, because I know it, and I know it's not a lot.
It's not a lot.
So to be traveling for 2 hours, that's showing some serious commitment on your part.
Yeah, well, and when I would do it is I would go up in the morning. Like I would go up the night before, and I would work the full day with him too. So I was doing stuff on Reading's locker room and the visiting locker room. So like a lot of the whole reason for a visiting room person is that, especially in the ECHL, you have one equipment manager there.
That's right.
So that one equipment manager needs to be working the bench. So you help with a load in, you help do their laundry, you help put sweat towels out for the guys, you keep everything in the visiting room stocked. So like coffee, gum, toiletries, towels, all of that stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah. And then like in the coast too, like they don't get post-game meals like they do in the A. So I'd have to put a sheet out from a pizza place, and I would have to call that pizza place and give the entire team order and be the one to meet the people, make sure it gets on the bus, make sure everything was right, make sure the money was right, all of that. So I did that, but I lived 2 hours away. So at the time, like when I first interviewed with them, I told them like I had family in Philly because I grew up in South Jersey. So they were like an hour and a half away. Like I could have went and stayed with them. I looked at Airbnbs, and too, like a visiting room position in the ECHL, you get $40 a game and $30 for laundry. And that was it. So that's all the money I was making. So he was like, "Nope, that. Like, you can stay with me and my wife." And she was pregnant at the time, mind you. And they had a little 2-bedroom apartment with their Burmese mountain dog, Stella, who I love to death.
How much did you up in that first year?
A lot.
Did you up those pizza orders? Like, how much were you getting
that
yelled
I didn't
at?
That I didn't fuck up. I fucked up a lot of other shit. Like, you know.
Like what?
He would have me, like, start straightening the room. And
Okay.
I would put elbow pads the wrong way. And he would be like, "Ellen, fucking, like, figure the out. Like, I'm not pissed off, but if you go to another team, you're going to, somebody's going to be pissed off."
Okay, first of all, that seems very tedious. And
It's
if that's
tedious.
a big up in your world,
tedious.
that something wasn't right, that speaks a little bit about how, anal retentive you guys are. Second
You
of
got to
all,
be OCD.
what did he call you?
Ellen.
All right, let's talk about this. Your nickname, Ellen.
My nickname was Ellen in Reading because when I first started, when I first interviewed, so I had a phone interview and then an in-person interview. The in-person video was pretty much like, you're already hired. And 19-year-old Eric, trying to make a first impression, went up in a tie and dress pants and everything, and I got made fun of for that.
Naturally.
Yeah. But I still kind of do. I didn't have it as bad. I had the undercut, haircut, shaved on the side kind of deal.
Yep.
So we were sitting in the equipment office with the athletic trainer, Sean Berberich, and my old boss, Jaybird, who I never call Jason, I only call him Jaybird.
Everybody in this game
Everybody's
has
got
nicknames.
a nickname.
If you have a nickname, some people don't even know what your actual first name is.
No, and like,
I mean, it's
he
crazy.
very much does not like be called Jason. He wants
Right.
to be called Jaybird. So
Okay.
like, even my parents call him Jaybird.
So where did Ellen come from? How did that
So
become your nickname?
we were sitting in there, and they were like, "We need to get you a nickname." And I had nicknames growing up all the time. Like, I had really long hair, and I was called Shaggy. I was called Eric. Like, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
So athletic trainer looks at me and my old boss look at me and they go, "You look like Ellen DeGeneres." And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to fucking roll with that. So I was Ellen. So some people in the coast and some people in the A, I still am Ellen. That's my name. I remember my first year when we were in playoffs, he had playoff name bars and he had Ellen on my playoff name bar. I still have it.
I don't see the Ellen DeGeneres.
Well, it's the beard too, man. But like 19-year-old Eric was clean shaven, baby face, undercut.
So you look like a lesbian.
Yeah,
is what you're telling us.
Yeah, and that's how I knew he was mad at me when he would call me a lesbian. Like that was our relationship. But like when we would meet a new team, he'd be like, "This is my lesbian assistant, Ellen." that was our relationship. But I mean too, like him, I owe everything to him. He taught me everything I know. Like I wouldn't be where I am now without him. And two, I lived with him for 2 years.
Yeah.
Like when my first year, I would drive up and sleep on his air mattress in his living room, and I drove him to the hospital the day his kid was born. So I've watched his child grow up. Like I held her as a baby, and now she's 5 years old and calls me Uncle Ellen.
And that's the best part about being in this industry. When you come across these people, it's one of the reasons I want to get started with this podcast is to hear some of those stories, because you come across people, and to bring in people like that in my life into this show, to talk to them. Like we had George Lopez on, the head equipment manager from the Henderson Silver Knights. And like I remember before he was married, and I remember him before a kid, and now all of a sudden he's playing dad. And like this is so weird to see someone grow up. And he gave you a really good nickname, one of several that you've got. And let me think. All right, so I know Ellen. They also call you Sevens, which I think that was pretty much exclusively Dan Bilesma.
It started as Dan Bilesma, and then now it has turned into the entire coaching staff and all of pretty much Florida's upper management.
Is that so Bill Zito just comes in?
Well,
What's
Bill
up,
Zito,
Sevens?
Bill Zito, he knows me but doesn't know me, but Paul Krapelka calls me Sevens. Roberto Luongo calls me Sevens. Brian McCabe calls me Sevens. Yeah.
And that's your main nickname. What do the guys call you?
The guys call me E.
Okay, that's lame. Like, they got to get better.
Some guys, like, call me Easy E, but it's just, I mean, Eric's just, like, E's a simple one. Like, it's just...
I get it. That's my problem with hockey nicknames. 50% of them, awesome. Like, fantastic.
And then there's 50% that are just...
It's like, you phoned that in, didn't you?
Yeah,
like,
but I mean, granted, like, I'll take the having the 3 different names and one being kind of, like, meh, than having... one shit nickname.
So explain Sevens. Obviously, this is your core nickname outside of maybe E. E is obvious. We can extrapolate the data there and figure out why you're called E. Why are you called Sevens? Where did that come from?
That came from that I'm a Civil War reenactor, as you know, and not the podcast listeners don't know, but I am a Civil War reenactor. And Dan found that out and immediately was like, "What? Like, I know what it is." He's like, "But what is it?" Then I explained it, and he's like, "Well, what group do you portray?" And I was like, the 7th Tennessee. And he goes, "All right, I'm gonna call you Sevens."
So you're like an original LARPer, right? Like
it's not LARPing.
Come
man.
on,
it's not LARPing. Like LARPing, you're running around with foam swords and fake costumes. Like this is legit. Like
you have real guns?
Yeah.
They fire?
Yeah.
You shoot people?
No, you shoot blanks. But like, I'm wearing wool clothes in the middle of July when those people are wearing cotton.
That's true, and they do make you shave and all that stuff to be...
For World War II. Civil War, you don't need to shave.
Okay, all right.
World War II...
Splitting hairs.
You're splitting hairs. Civil War, you can do whatever.
But there's no fantasy, there's no magic. You're saying it's different from LARPing because of the fact that it's based on real events.
Yeah.
You guys are trying to strictly adhere to
I'm trying
the
to
events.
portray the people that did this.
Okay.
You know, I'm trying to show the people that this is what it looked like for a Civil War soldier or a World War II soldier in that time period.
And you're trying to win that war.
I mean, I'm not trying to win that war because ultimately the South lost that war.
Are you always on the South side?
Mostly. I mean, I have...
So you're a loser.
Why do we got to do this?
I'm just saying.
Why do you got to do this?
All right. Do you get to pick? Like,
You can, but like when I was, 14 years old getting into it, and the guy that lived around the corner from my street in my house, that was his group, and that's who I ultimately fell in with. And those, like, Jaybird means a lot to me, but like my reenactment group have watched me grow up. Like, they are my family. Like, my sister once has talked about inviting a couple of them to her wedding. Like,
how much of your hockey equipment manager lifestyle of doing laundry, sewing, putting things together, makeshifting pads and patches translates into all of your reenactments?
Honestly, a lot, because I learned how to sew from reenacting, so that went into hockey.
Oh, you learned to sew because of reenacting.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because when you're in a field in July, and you split a pair of pants, you have to learn very quickly how. And I split my pants a lot because I do a lot of. I mean, you've seen me. I do a lot of dumb stuff.
No.
And I get bored.
Get into it.
I get bored very easily. So like when you go to dye and I fall over a fence, you're gonna naturally rip some stuff.
Sure. Okay. So we talked to George a little bit. For those of you who haven't heard that podcast, definitely take a listen. He talked a lot about what it was like being a head guy going up into the NHL and basically being a number 3 for the Vegas Golden Knights run. But we didn't really dive into the day-to-day. So what is the day-to-day in the American Hockey League for a number 2? And I want you to describe it to me as if we were the road team, as if the Charlotte Checkers are the road team, because I know you guys are much, much busier on the road.
So that's what I meant. Do you want me to do road? Because road, honestly, then this is all honesty.
Tell me about Eric. What does Eric do on the road? You don't have to give me the X and O's. I don't need to know, like, from 11:15 you're doing this.
No, but that's what I'm going to say. Honestly, being a
road
equipment manager is a lot easier than a home equipment manager.
Then give me the road. I want to hear the road, because I think when Eric has free time, Eric has stories, and that's where we want to go.
Yeah, Eric doesn't have a lot of free time.
Oh, Eric has a lot of free time on the road. I've sat in those hotel rooms with you guys and just hung out doing nothing.
Some of those I can't talk about, but
understood. But what's your role? You know, what is your process?
Obviously, the head equipment manager, Chris Fournier, him and I drive the box truck everywhere. So, like when we're leaving for a road trip, guys are getting on for practice, I'm starting to load the truck. Guys are bringing bags out. Some of it's already loaded. I'm loading up the truck, and then Chris and I sit in a truck for however many hours it's going to be. Yep. And everybody's always like, that's got to be interesting. Like, what do you guys talk about? And I look at everybody, and I'm like,
nothing.
We're both exhausted and both
on your phone.
Preparing for what is the inevitable of that. Let's say we're going to Providence, and it's 14 hours away. Like, we're preparing that we're getting in at 3, 4 in the morning, and we got to unpack an entire truck and set up an entire locker room for the guys so that when they come in, everything is totally set, that they are not coming in asking for anything.
And that is the one thing, obviously, as a broadcaster, I don't spend a lot of time in the locker rooms. I spend time talking to guys, and I'll come in and talk with you guys, but I'm not there, when the guys are getting dressed and getting ready, because I have my own things. I'm getting ready up top. When I first got into the sport, I was amazed at how important, how paramount it is that room is absolutely. It's like the president's coming in.
Well, that goes back to like what
the elbow pads being
like
the wrong way.
You never know who's going to walk into the locker room at any point.
So
like
it's
Bill
just
Zito. Bill Zito could walk into our locker room at any day, and I want it to be perfect, because if he comes in and it looks like a mess, then that's on me and Chris.
It's all appearance. Yeah. And it's incredible, because another thing that I've learned about hockey players too, they are creatures of habit.
Oh yeah.
And if they're used to coming in at a certain time and everything's where it's supposed to be, they feel better.
But what's funny though is they never put their stuff back right, ever. The only person on the Charlotte Checkers the last 2.5 years that has put their stuff back perfectly after every practice, every game is Alexi Heponiemi.
Okay.
Everybody else, it's a mess, and it takes me, like, after every game, after every practice, I run through and clean everybody up, white skates down, white visors down. But Heppo is the only one who puts his stuff back, does his straps right, puts everything back perfectly.
Did you ever talk to him and, like, ask him why he does that?
He just does it because he knows it helps us.
He
knows it because he knows it helps us.
Everybody else figures, well, we're tipping these guys at Christmas, and we're tipping them at the end of the year.
Care.
So
like, I yell at Bunneman all the time. I'm like, dude, you see what Heppo's doing?
He's been in the league for 6-7 years now. He doesn't care.
He goes, it's your job. And I'm like, it is my job, but like, yeah, a little bit of help, man.
A little give and take, right?
Yeah,
like, you like it a certain way. Yeah.
The guys are very superstitious, and
that
has turned into me becoming superstitious. And Chris will attest to this, that I have my routine, and it does not change.
Can attest to that. When we were in Hershey for the postseason, I was getting pictures and everything in the locker room, and it was all pristine. And you were telling me some of your superstitions, like, what is it? You don't touch the goalies until last in terms of hanging the jerseys?
I don't do the starting goal. I do the starting goalie last.
That's what it is, yep.
The second to last is always Dolps.
Okay, team captain.
Yeah, yep. And I always take the fans down. So let's say it's a 7 o'clock game. I take the fans down at 2:45. Pass the socks out, and then at 3 o'clock I start hanging the jersey. And I always put the same music playlist on, and I always play the same couple songs.
Elvis.
There's a couple Elvis in there.
We're gonna get to that too.
There's a couple Elvis in there.
If there's 3 things that encapsulate Eric Cosentino,
you gotta say 4. There's 4 things.
Okay, there's 4. Number 1, the entire just reenactment.
Yeah.
You know, the Civil War, the World War II reenactment.
Yep.
Number 2, hockey.
Yep.
I mean, that might even be number 1, but we're going in no particular order. Number 3, Elvis. Number 4, cigars.
For sure.
Those have to be the number. Those are the things
That's my life.
if I could boil you down,
Yeah.
that's what would be left.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally get it. Because I remember walking in. We were in Hershey this past year. It was during the postseason. It was probably game number 1, I think, because
game one.
I came in.
Was here.
I meant game number 1 in Hershey. We played
yeah.
those 2 games in Hershey, so it would have been game 3 officially.
Yeah.
And I came in, and you were just jamming out to Elvis, and I want to say it was Suspicious Minds. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And I was like, all right, this is good. Like that's one of my favorite Elvis songs too. So I roll with it. The next night, sure enough, I didn't come down at the exact same time, but I happened to walk in and Suspicious Minds is on. And then what completely threw me for a loop is the playlist then flips over to like heavy metal. Like it just, and I'm like, what is going on here?
That's my style, man. I mean, I listen to everything and anything. Like if you look at my music playlist.
So you're driving to work, you're going from Elvis to Godsmack to whatever.
It's Elvis, Kiss, Ozzy Osbourne. That could go to country. It could go to sea shanties.
I have sea shanties.
Oh yeah, I am all over the board, man, with music. I have Civil War songs on my playlist. Like
I didn't even know they had. Well, I knew they had music, but like I just imagine like the fife and the the drum on,
like
on the front lines.
Songs. Oh yeah.
All right. Okay. So you've now been in hockey for how long?
I'm going into my sixth season.
And you were in Reading for 4?
Reading 3, and then this is my 3rd season.
Going into your 6th. Okay, so so this will be your 3rd season. You've almost been in Charlotte as long as you were in Reading, which is incredible to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
What are some of those differences between the ECHL and AHL that really give me just like the top, especially the ones that surprised you? That once you got here and you kind of got your feet into the ground and you're like, okay, I kind of understand what's going on. What were the ones that really took you over and go, this is really different?
I mean, definitely the speed of game for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like you have AHL guys on the coast, but also too like how much more you have to kind of put on a professional face. Like in the coast, like I'd go into work every day in like athletic shorts and just a random t-shirt. And, you know, here it's on a game day, it's golf shorts and a checker shirt. And then like, you know, for the bench apparel, like in Reading, we wore hoodies and hoodies and underarm pants.
Just that professionalism.
It just jumped. And I'm great. Like that's great. It's awesome. And to like, you know, in Reading, we would straighten the room, but we wouldn't do up the straps. Like, we just...
What do you mean do up the straps?
Like on the shoulder pads. Like, I do up the straps on the shoulder pads. Like, I make sure nothing's hanging. Where in the coast, you just kind of hang the stuff.
Okay.
So it's definitely the level of professionalism and to the level of guys. I mean, you're working with big name guys. Like in the coast, you're working with guys that are, you know, been around, but maybe never really got a crack. Like I remember working with Garrett Mitchell and Reading, and to me that was, oh my god, like I watched this guy growing up playing, like when he was in Hershey, and I watched him growing up. And then, you know, last year we had Michael Del Zotto, and I watched that guy when I was a kid playing for the Flyers. So it's that difference of the people you're meeting just immensely changes.
And the best part about you, Eric, personally, is no matter how professional these guys are, no matter what kind of demeanor they seem to have, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, Eric loves to find the child inside of every person, and you bring that out, whether it's some of the incidents that have happened between you and coaches, between the individualized handshakes that you have. And Charlotte Checkers fans out there listening know, because we put something out almost every year, or at least the last 2 years.
There's always something of me putting,
and it went viral, the handshakes in the locker room. So for those of you who have never been to the Red Line Club or been down low to see kind of how the Checkers come out at Bojangles Coliseum, the locker room weaves right through the built-in restaurant in Bojangles Coliseum that leads right to the benches, and Eric is right there where those doors open, and every single, it's almost like a receiving line at a wedding, and Eric is there just giving all these different handshakes, chest bumps. Like, it's so funny to see the guys. I think it's just a paradox, because they go, you're kind of in the middle in the grand scheme of things, right? Like they're coming through and they're giving Chris a fist bump.
Well, Chris is usually at the end, so it's usually Al, Zach, Jordy, Sags, Stalzy, Max's buddies, his brothers. Then there's me, and then they end with Chris.
So they're going like they're super professional in that first half, especially with Jordy and some of the rest of them, and they're just kind of fist bumping. They get to Eric, this like they turn into like orangutans, like doing this kind of stuff, and then they get back to being serious. Like it's just like a flip of a switch. You bring that out in guys.
But you know what's funny too is like when you guys posted that video, I was kind of like annoyed, not annoyed, but in that I don't do my job and I don't do the things that I do for the recognition.
Well, I understand, but
I don't want to be the face of the Charlotte Checkers. I don't want people like going, oh, that's the assistant equipment guy. I do my job because it's my job, and I want to see the players perform to their best ability.
But you have to realize a hockey team is made up of
many,
many people that are trying to do their jobs.
It definitely
is. One of my jobs, one of the front office's jobs, is to humanize the players and make them feel accessible to see some of these things that are going on. This is why I like having you on, because people are kind of getting a look into what's going on, and you develop these individual handshakes with guys, and you have personal relationships with guys across the board.
Especially our captain, Zach Dalpe. You can attest for that, of how close I am with him and his family.
A lot. Like, I mean, his kids come to the rink and they run and see Uncle Eric. Like,
they love coming. They will ask to skip school to come see me and hang out with me for the day.
I mean, I'd want to skip school to go hang out at a hockey rink too.
But they like, even when they go to the game, like his wife, Cass, she'll be in the Red Line Club and they see me, they run out to me and they don't even care. And that's another one too, like Rhett this year, Riley Nash's son. It started with me and him, like I would be carrying the gloves and he'd come out and like want a high five, and then he started helping me carry the gloves out to the bench, and his wife was just like, yep, go, Eric's coming, you're good. But I like being behind the scenes. Like I like doing the behind the scenes work, you know, that people can see the pictures on Facebook and Instagram of the jerseys being hung up, being on, wow, that looks awesome. I like that. When there's pictures of me doing it, it's like, all right, I'm just trying to.
You did ask me in Hershey. I got a picture and I had like your hands, and you're like, you know, just get the
like
face
totally
out. Like my hands are fine.
Well,
but,
and what's funny is the one video you had of me doing it. My old boss sent me a video, and he goes, "Rare Ellen sighting," and I was like, "Yeah, it's real rare."
Have you come across like any really weird relationships, whether it be with players or fans?
What do you mean by weird?
Like just kind of things that you look back and go, yeah, that was kind of odd. Like, has anybody asked for anything that's just been like, that's weird? Like I don't know, just player stuff that's like still sweaty, or
I mean, just it's not like people ask for sticks all the time, and half the time I ignore them. But like, the only thing that's weird to me, and we didn't do this in Reading, was when we give the jersey off the backs for specialty jerseys.
Yeah,
never experienced that in Reading. We always would wash them, then the guys would sign them the next day, and then we took them up. So it's not weird, like I get it, but it was very different to being told, hey, you don't have to wash the jerseys tonight because we have a specialty jersey, and the fans are taking them right from the guys. And I was like, do people realize like they sweat, bleed, and spit in these things, and then people
like it.
It's weird, man.
I know. Okay, see, that's a perfect answer.
I'm the one putting the jerseys in the wash every night, and like it's gross. Like I'm used to it. Like I'm grabbing their sweaty jock straps and hanging them up in their stalls after games, but like I don't know. There's like, I'm not paying $800 for Anthony Botetto's jersey that he just wore after a game, and I love Bitsy to death, but like I don't want that guy's jersey right after he skated. Like
some people do, most people do, as we found out.
Yeah, most people do, and like I get it. Like it's that draw. To me, like that's one thing. I
think it's just because you're desensitized, right? Like probably. You see hockey players all the time.
I do.
You have these relationships with guys. When you think back at your whole career, you've already talked about Zach Dalpe. When you talk about other players that immediately, or coaches or whoever, immediately come to your mind, like let's just say you're having a moment of reflection and you're looking back in your whole career.
I mean, we both know who I'm going to say.
I know this is a good interview question. I'm leading you into an answer. Who are some of the guys that immediately come to mind?
Dan Bylsma for sure.
Beautiful. Dan Bylsma, for those out there not listening or not watching the Checkers or not informed of who Dan Bylsma is. Dan Bylsma is a Stanley Cup winning head coach for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's a gold medal winning coach for Team USA. The year TJ Oshie went 15 rounds in the shootout.
Which I know the story behind that one too.
You've told me that story, as a matter of fact. Thanks to you, I know that story as well. But he is just a consummate professional. He's a fantastic head coach, one of the best that the game has seen in the recent years, and here you are, Eric Cosentino, the guy that does Civil War reenactments, who loves Elvis and smokes way too many cigars.
I would go way too many.
Do you have more than 2 a day on average per year?
No, honestly, like, I haven't smoked that many in a while. Because
right,
when
fair.
I worked at the cigar shop, yes.
Okay, well, that's different because you're working.
Yeah, but now, no, I'm lucky if I get one a weekend.
But here's you. With all those traits, you find a very good friend in Dan Bilesma, who's what, 30 years your senior? And I'm playing it safe, I think. I don't know exactly how old he is.
In his
but
50s.
Yeah, so this is a much older guy who's been around every level of hockey to lifting the Stanley Cup.
The biggest names.
And here's Eric, and you guys are this tight. How did this relationship happen? Obviously, it was last year in your first year with the Charlotte Checkers. Talk a little bit about your relationship with him.
So it just kind of happened, like, we were at the rink, and, like, you build a relationship with the coaches, and they're around, and, Jordy, I have a relationship with Jordy. I have a relationship with Bobby Sagwanetti, Jared Stahl. Like, you build relationships with them, and how it really started, in all honesty, and it's kind of funny, is the whole cigar thing, because he's a big cigar guy. And, like, he knew me. We'd see each other at the rink. Like, he'd come and mess around and hang out with us. And we were in Alex Ambrose, the trainer's room, and we were in there, and they were talking about, if we won the lottery, what would we put on our houses? And Dan and Al kind of said they would put, like, a sauna in there, and I was like, honestly, I'd put a cigar room in.
Yeah.
And they were like, Dan's like, you like cigars? I'm like, do I like cigars? And I was like, tell him what you just did during COVID. And I was like, I worked at a cigar shop. Dan's like, I love cigars. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I have, I go to a cigar shop here in Charlotte, and I have a buddy who works for a cigar company. Like, I have great relationships there. Like, you want to go one time? And he's like, for sure. So Dan and I went to the Vintage. I'll give a shout out to the Vintage because they are great. I'll give a shout out to McAuliffe Cigars too, because that's what I smoke for Austin Borgstein, my cigar buddy. And so we went, and that just kind of opened the relationship between Dan and I. It was a common interest him and I both had, and it was a chance for me and him just to kind of sit together and kind of feel each other out in a way, and realize that we both had something very in common, and we were both very similar people.
Yeah, you're both crazy deep down.
Deep down, yeah, he's fucking crazy. So am I. But and then it started a thing when we go on road trips. We'd always find a cigar lounge together.
Yeah, you guys asked me to go a couple of times, and on both occasions, I'm a cigar guy myself.
The one time I f***ed up.
Yeah.
One time was my fault.
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
own up to that one.
Yeah.
The one time it was mine.
The one time they're closed. It's like you.
And my dad was supposed to go. It was supposed to be you, Dan, Rip, and my dad. We were all supposed to go, and it was closed. So
where was that?
Cleveland.
Was it Cleveland?
Yeah, because my dad was at the Christmas Story house.
Oh, that's right. So, okay, so there was that time, and there was another time where you guys just decided not to go anymore. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't remember what happened.
Our favorite one that we went to was in Hershey. That was like kind of our one spot. It was kind of nice. It was in Elizabethtown. It was kind of like 10, 15 minutes away.
Outside of Hershey?
Yeah, that was our one spot that we like to go to.
Okay.
It was next to a pizza place, but the bartender / owner remembered us. And, like, the time we came back, he's like, oh, you guys are in town. That's awesome. Like, he remembered us because we went so many times. But
my favorite Dan story what happened in Hershey. He was in Hershey. We were staying at the Hershey Lodge.
Yeah.
And in Hershey, at the Hershey Lodge, for those of you who have never been there, there's it's called the Bear's Den. It's an actual restaurant. And Dan was sitting there eating, and somebody came up to him and it was just like, hey, did anyone ever tell you?
No, that was at the cigar lounge.
Was it at the cigar lounge?
It was at the cigar lounge because I was there, and Dan gave me shit because I was like, yeah, it is him.
Yeah, someone's like, hey, did anyone ever tell you that you look like Dan Bilesma?
It was me, Rip, and Dan were at the cigar lounge.
He was like, my mom said so or something
we were at the cigar lounge. We're sitting there, and these two cops who were actually really great dudes, we got to talk to them, and they go, hey, has anyone ever told you look like Dan Bilesma? And he goes, yeah, my mom tells me that from time to time. And Rip and I started laughing to each other, and Rip and I were like, yeah, it's because it's him. And they ended up being from Pittsburgh, so they were Penguins fans, and they were great. Like, we left them tickets for the game the next night, but they were awesome. It was at the cigar lounge in Hershey.
Just so funny.
But he's honestly one of the most humble people I've ever met. Like,
yeah.
You would never have guessed that guy won a Stanley Cup. Like, he doesn't brag about it.
I mean, the thing with Dan is we talk about how humble he is in that trip, but for folks who weren't around, so we were in Syracuse, and for some reason our flights got canceled. It wasn't weather, because I remember it was cold.
It was snow.
It wasn't snow in Syracuse, though. It was snow somewhere else along the line. It might have been
Rochester or somewhere you guys were flying out from that there was snow and they kept getting delayed
and delayed.
There
and
was
delayed
snow. No,
and
there was snow in Syracuse because I specifically remember
there was snow on the ground, but it wasn't a blizzard.
I
like,
remember
we weren't trapped.
I remember loading the truck in the snow and it sucked.
Yeah. And
every load in I've done it or load out I've done in Syracuse has been awful.
Right.
Awful. Well, like the worst one was when we had to look when Spencer and I got called up and I didn't know and the entire truck was packed and I had to unpack the truck and repack it in the 0-degree weather. My mustache was frozen.
Syracuse alone, just the walk up to the press
Syracuse
box
sucks.
is so high up.
Sorry, Syracuse fans, if you're listening, but your building sucks.
I have on my TikTok, I was doing walks to the booth in the different arenas we've gone to, and the walk to the Syracuse booth, even at like 5 times speed, is still like a minute-long video. It is so high up there. But our flight gets canceled, so we end up taking a charter bus all the way down, and I just remember Dan going, row by row, just talking to guys. Some guys he'd pop open the laptop and they'd start doing video and breaking things down. Other things he was just shooting the shit and just being a person. And I think that kind of helped connect the coaching staff to the players a little bit better because that was right around the time that the team really got hot. It wasn't last year. That team was, just kind of treading water for a while. A good team, always in playoff contention, but ultimately ends up winning the Atlantic Division.
Yeah.
And it was because of a hot run and some help from Hartford that completely fell off the table.
Well,
but
and the funny thing with that team was at the time when we got hot, we were missing a lot of guys.
We were. And I remember what I like to think as the moment that team really gelled together. And that was the dinner in Hershey.
Yeah.
And
I won't talk about that dinner because it affects you, but that dinner was...
I have no problem talking about that dinner
I could start
story.
I could start it up because that was awesome.
I have no problem with that whatsoever.
We all still talk about it to this
because
day.
it's not my fault. It was not. Well, it was my fault, but it was also not my fault.
I would agree with you that dinner very much brought everybody together, especially a lot of the Coast guys that didn't end up staying, but they felt more a part of the team.
And there was 2 things that happened at that dinner. And we'll get into what happened with me second here because I want to stay with Dan.
Yeah.
And it was the reenactment of
the reads
of one of Dan's lineup reads. And again, for the non-hockey people out there who are listening, every single game before the game, someone will be chosen to read the lineup of the starters that night. And it's usually used as a hype up moment. They're usually walking around pointing just okay, we've got Dalpe, we've got Heponiemi, we've got Dennis. It's this big thing. And for the Checkers, as you talk about, they're superstitious. So when one guy does it and the team wins, they do it again. And they do it again, and guys go on runs.
I went on a run. Dan went on a long run.
And when you go on a long run like that, you try to keep it fresh. You try to keep it interesting. He did some stuff.
He did some awesome stuff. So what it started with was the first time he went in, and he had saran wrap around his head, around his glasses, and went in like that. But Dan. It's usually for Jordy, it's on the assistant coaches to do like the pregame talk of like, hey, we got to start it this way. We got to look out for these guys, power play, whatever, yada, yada, yada. So Dan would always be the one that would do that. And then he would do the lineup. So he did that with the saran wrap around his eyes. All serious, like super, like boom, 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 boom.
X's and O's, like we need to start hot. We need to come out on time.
Yeah, and like guys are like trying not to laugh. And then he goes right into the lineup. And then the second time he did it, he came up to me before the game. Or no, it was in Rochester, and him and I were walking to the cigar lounge, Smokey Joe's, that was a funny story with Dan and I. But he's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I got to think of something. I'm like, oh, you could write up the lineup on your back. And he's like, what if I got it tattooed? And I was like, that'd be kind of funny. He's like, I don't know if I want Sarah Noel tattooed on my back, but that'd be kind of funny. So he's like, all right, I'll write that. So he wrote it on his chest. He wrote the starting lineup on his chest. So he came in, saran wrap around his eyes, took his shirt off, had the starting lineup on his chest, and then had Joey DeCord's number on his back. So he's walking out and just goes, and 35, we got Dax, and then just walks out and everybody starts lying. And then he did it another time in Roch, or that was Syracuse. Then he did Roch, and he came up to me. He's like, hey, I need you to play Stone Cold Steve Austin music. And then I need you to toss me 2 bottles of water. And I'm like, all right. And the speaker f***ed up, because I didn't leave my phone in the locker room, so it got disconnected, so I didn't have the music right away. So
way to go. He asked you to do one thing.
I got yelled at for that. But so he jumps up. You've been in Roch's visiting room. He stood on the table in the very front of the room, jumped up on it, takes his shirt off, I throw him the 2 bottles of water. He smashes them, goes like this, does the lineup, walks out, puts his suit on, goes on the bench in his soaking wet dress shirt, and stands on the bench the entire time, and looked at me at one point and goes, I regret every decision I've ever made. It's like, I'm so cold, and now it's making me have to pee. This is terrible. I don't know why I did that. So then he did those. Then we were in Charlotte one time, and he came up to me. He's like, hey, you're doing the lineup. And, you know, me being me, I'm naturally freaking out a little bit because you got to go in front of the locker room and do something stupid, and it's like, oh, what am I going to do? So I'm like, all right, I know what I'm going to do. And it was me, Chris, and Wilkie in the room, and they're like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to take my shirt off. And Wilkie starts dying laughing. He goes, if that doesn't get them pumped up, I don't know what will. I'm like, exactly. So I walk in the room, rip my polo off, start whipping it around. Everybody's dying laughing. I think it was either Dolps or Willie were like, what a body on you. And then I did the lineup. We won that game. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? So Dan's like, hey, get a cigar, get a shirt, cut the shirt a little bit, walk in, rip it. I'm like, all right. So I go in to do it again. I go in with the cigar in my mouth. Everybody's dying laughing because they all know how big of a cigar guy I am. I rip my shirt off, throw it at somebody. We win that game. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys. Like, what the fuck? So then Chris and I came up with this brilliant idea of hiding in a laundry cart. So I get in this laundry cart. I have a hard hat on. They throw a bunch of towels over me. And Chris needed Al went to Alex Ambrose and was like, hey, I need your help. We're going to flip Eric. Because he didn't think he could flip me out, I guess, thinking I was fat. But so then what we did do is Dan was calling for me. And we were waiting off to the side by the showers of the locker room. So Dan's like, all right, Sevens, where the f*** are you? And everybody's yelling for me. So then they roll the cart in, flip it. But Al flips it so hard that the cart lands on top of me. So, like, everything we had planned, just, like, Al flipped it so hard. So then it lands on top of me, and I jump out. And Cole Lynn's sitting there. Cole Lynn goes, oh, my God, and starts dying laughing. And in the video, you can see Logan Hutzko with his head in his lap, cracking up laughing because I just jumped out of a cart. And after that one, Connor Carrick goes, Checkers are on a 70-game winning streak. And Eric comes out of the ceiling of the locker room like a Navy SEAL. And we all start dying laughing. We lost that game, so I didn't have to do it again. I did do it this year, though.
You remade that?
Well, I didn't do it totally. I did take my shirt off. It was the school day game in Bridgeport.
Oh, okay.
And Sags,
nice 11 a.m. start.
Sags came up to me. He goes, I don't know who else is going to pump them up for this game, so it's got to be you. And I knew the person that was going to think it was the funniest was Potato, and he did.
Yep.
So I walked in and said, 10:30 a.m. game. This shit. Let's get this win and get the out of here. Took my shirt off. Bitsy's dying laughing. He goes, I didn't see this coming. Holy shit.
But I mean, I'm thinking back to that dinner because the rookies then were tasked to reenact some of them, and I remember some of the scuttle going on. I mean, this was the entire team went out for dinner in a nice restaurant in Hershey in downtown. Nice. I mean, you're talking.
It was a steakhouse.
It was a steakhouse. White tablecloth, black napkins type steakhouse. And thankfully, thank God, we had our own little room.
Oh, thank God.
We were kind of locked in. We had a TV up on the wall. And I remember the guys running around. They were trying to find the saran wrap. Like, they went back into the kitchen.
Friender was the one who did it. Friender was the Dan.
They went back. Yeah, that's right. He went back into the kitchen, puts the saran wrap on. They borrowed my glasses. I was the only one in the room wearing glasses, so they borrowed my glasses to be Dan, and it was hilarious. And I think that really started to galvanize the team.
Friender wrote 3-5 on his ass.
That's right. And
the waitresses were in there, and we were like, oh my God.
That might get us a little bit in trouble. Yeah, because Dan originally had the forwards and defensemen on his chest, and then on his back he had the goalie. But Friender
on his
takes
ass.
it up a notch. He put three on one cheek and 5 on the other cheek. And I really think that was amazing. Because
I think what else did it for us on that too was your fault. That really brought everybody. Because I will tell that story because it's just.
It was. I'm going to correct you if you get the details wrong.
I'm going to get the details right. Okay. You were going online to put one of the hockey games on the TV.
Yeah, so we had a TV. It didn't have cable internet.
Nope.
And
so you went on your computer.
Of course, on my phone.
Oh, it was your phone? I thought it was your computer.
No, I didn't have my computer. We were out to dinner.
I thought it was someone's computer.
It's my phone.
All right, your phone.
Definitely my phone.
All right, whatever.
Because I figure, you know what? No, it was actually on the TV. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was on the TV. It did have internet access and it had a browser.
Yeah.
But it didn't have cable. So me being the guy that wears glasses, obviously he's the nerd. He's the one that knows how to get this game up and pirate the game. And I'm like, yeah, so you happen to know a website where we could probably get the game.
You went on that website, and then lo and behold, Bang Bros comes up on the TV, and
you're missing so many of the good details.
That's the best
man.
details that Bang Bros went on the TV, and everybody starts dying laughing.
Well, the reason it was so funny was because before this whole thing started, as I was typing in the website, Dalpy goes, "Don't put any porn on the TV." And I'm like, relax, it's just a pirate site. Like, it's not a big deal.
Porn came on
and
the TV.
Sure enough, I type in the site, I pull up the game, and then boom, pop-up ad, and it's just the whole place just starts dying.
And the waitresses were in there too.
That was the best part. Never seen a porn pop-up ad on that website, and still to this day have never seen it except for that one instance. I was
awesome.
Mortified. But we got the game out. It was the Capitals game. I can't remember who they were playing.
I don't remember. All I remember was that Bang Bros came on the TV and everybody started hysterically laughing.
And it was 10 times funnier because Dalpy expressly prohibited me from doing that. And I was like, don't worry. I've never seen it.
It came on.
But hey, the team came together. We won a run, became Atlantic Division champs. And
I think
a lot of those guys were competing for a Calder Cup this past year with Coachella Valley under Dan's leadership.
Yeah, and that's, for me at the time, and like we were talking about on the car ride here with Dan, like, you definitely meet people, and you definitely meet people that, and you look back and you're like, wow. And at the time, I didn't realize the extent of Dan and I's relationship and how much it meant to me. And I've told him that, like, Jordy made fun when it was Dan's last day. He's like, do I need to give you guys a minute to yourselves? But to me, being in my first year in the American League, 24 years old, like, you're happy that you made it to that far. Because you never know. Like, and I had a time, like, when I was in COVID, because I wasn't working hockey, I almost quit. Like, I really almost did not get back into hockey, and I owe a lot to my parents and my old boss, Jay Bird, for telling me not to. Like, my parents were like, we're going to support you in whatever you want. And Jay Bird was like, I'm not going to let you quit. Like, you've come too far. I've taught you too much. You're too good at what you do for me to let you just quit like that. And then to go into my first year and having the relationship that Dan and I had, like, we were really close. Like, I still talk to him to this day. Like, he called me when I was down in Florida for a couple of days and was just calling me to say, hey. And I was actually in a Wawa. And Wawa. Love Wawa. And I was in there, and I was trying to go to self-checkout, so he couldn't hear that I was in there. And the self-checkout went, welcome to Wawa. He goes, are you in a fucking Wawa right now? And I started dying. I'm like, yeah, I am. He goes, you're f***ed. But, like, the extent of the relationship that Dan and I had, that we were just that close, and that to have a relationship with somebody like that too just meant the world to me, especially too, like, when we were in Boston, you guys didn't get to go, unfortunately, but when we were in Boston, I found the oldest tobacco store in Boston.
I remember you telling me a story. Yeah, this was a trip up to Providence.
Yep. No, it was Springy for playoffs.
So Springy for playoffs.
Jordy did not want us to be in Springy for 3 days.
So we managed a trip to...
Yeah, we managed a trip to Boston for the night, so we left after the game.
Me, Zach Harvey, Paige Sliney, Nick Najelski, we're all back in wonderful Springfield, Massachusetts.
Didn't somebody have COVID?
No.
I think you guys did.
No, we were fine.
Oh, I don't.
I just think
I know it was
separation of church and state.
I will say, though, it was because Florida's management covered it.
Very well.
That's why.
Very well.
Because, like, Gregory Campbell set up a dinner at a restaurant in Boston that he used to go to.
Very well.
But so Dan and I went to this oldest tobacco store, and it was like a 20-minute walk from our hotel. And then we went there, walked around the store. I was talking pipes with the guy, talking cigars. And then Dan and I went into Commons and just sat in Commons, had cigars. And, like, I have heard plenty of Dan stories. I've heard Malkin stories. I've heard Crosby stories. I've heard the TJOC shootout story. But that moment there really solidified it for me on how close we really were, because we had the kind of conversation that you just don't have with everybody. Like, we talked about his experience with GMs and, you know, him going to the NHL and then kind of having to come back, and that kind of solidified it for me of how close Dan and I really were, that he felt that he could have that kind of conversation with me.
Especially when his, I don't want to say his default demeanor, but his public-facing demeanor is very closed off.
Yeah,
You know,
and
so
he's
when
not.
you're getting info and when he's talking to you and being very real with you,
Yeah.
you know that you've gotten
He's actually
under the crust.
invited me to his house in Michigan. Like, he wants me to go out there and stay with him for a week, and I wanted to. I just, obviously their run they had.
First of all, if he invites you to a house, you are going to wherever he's living in Coachella Valley. You're not going to Michigan.
No, he wants me to go to Michigan.
I get it. That's his home state, but
I would go there, though. I've seen pictures of his house, and he's got all of his Winter Classic jackets he's worn. So,
that's
like,
pretty cool.
Stanley Cup rings there. Like, that kind of stuff would be cool to see. But
I remember he had his one ring on during the playoffs.
I don't remember that.
I don't know if it was the Stanley Cup ring or it might have been his Calder Cup ring that he won
He
with
doesn't have to
Wilkes-Barre.
He didn't win a Calder Cup.
He did with Wilkes-Barre Scranton.
He did not. I will hold you to that. We could pull it up because he
There
told
is
me
literally a banner in Mohegan Sun Arena
that's
that
him
has
with
Dan Bilesma
with the Stanley Cup.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Come on,
You're right.
man. That's my man.
Fair. That's
Because
fair.
he told
That's
me
fair.
how he's never won a Calder Cup and he
That's
wanted
fair.
to win a Calder Cup.
Well, he almost had the chance.
The best story I ever have with Dan, though, like about his playing career, he told us about how he was in the coast and they were going to Johnstown where they filmed Slapshot.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he walked into
I've
the
been in
rink.
that rink.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
walked into that rink.
They also filmed some of it in Utica.
Yeah, yes. But the main rink, he said he walked in and he said that was when he had a moment of, what the fuck am I doing with my life that I'm playing in this rink and it looks exactly like it did when they filmed the movie.
Yep. Yeah, because it's Johnstown and the Tomahawks play there in the
but
NAHL.
Like, when you're hearing Dan tell you that story, you just kind of laugh. And Dan has plenty of stories, but
Dan's a great guy.
he's an unbelievable person.
Dan has plenty of stories.
Yes.
But this is the Eric Cosentino.
I know.
He's my
we're
guest.
talking about Dan,
We're
man.
talking
Like,
about,
what do you want me to do? That's my guy.
I'm just saying, like, if I want to have Dan on,
You should.
I'll let you
Give him a
know,
call.
and we can
I would
set that
join
up.
that one. That would be hilarious.
just have you phone in.
Have a surprise guest.
Just this is Ellen. Hi. No, but this is about Eric, right?
Yeah.
Like, so now that you've been doing this for going on to your 6th year, could you envision yourself doing anything else?
No, I really don't.
I
And
mean-
I tell people that all the time. Like, I've done a lot of jobs. I mean, like, I worked at a cigar shop, and obviously cigars are a big passion of mine. I was into history, and history is a big passion of mine. But I really, truly don't see myself doing anything else. Like, and the hours, obviously, that I work,
They're
and
long. I mean,
yeah,
and
like,
weird.
the hours I work and the zero free time I have during the season, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world.
It does help that, you know, we're able to do this podcast pretty much whenever we want because it's the off season for you.
Yes,
and
it is.
You're just kind of hanging back and getting mentally prepared for next year.
Yeah.
You've got those 4 cruxes, right? We talked about the cigars and your relationship with Dan and the cigars. Now you worked at a cigar shop. We talked a little bit about, you know, your reenactment history. We haven't talked about really is your love of Elvis. We touched on it a little bit.
Very quickly.
But this started when you were a kid.
Yep.
And you're now, I remember this wasn't last season, it was the season before. We were on the road in Utica and skate was going on. We had just rolled in. Guys are on the ice. I'm hanging out with you in the corner down on ice level. And you were telling me that they had just cast Austin Butler to play as Elvis. And you were psyched. Or maybe the trailer had just dropped. Maybe that's what it was.
Because
you were pumped.
I had been following that movie since 2017 when they first announced it. Like, and to the point of that, my sister worked at a movie theater at the time, and I told her because they could write to get movie posters. And I told her, I said, you need to go in and write for that poster. So she did, and her manager went up to her and said, how do you know about this movie? She's like, my brother. He knows.
He's
like,
ahead of the curve.
Yeah. The trailer just dropped because I remember the day it dropped. I was at the rink and I watched it and I looked at Chris and I said, don't bother me. He's like, why? I'm like, I got to watch this trailer. I've been waiting for this trailer. Like,
you made me watch the trailer.
I made a lot of people watch
it was
that
a good trailer. I'm sorry I haven't seen the movie.
Come on, man. I've seen that movie 5 or 6 times at this point.
I believe it.
I might even go watch it later tonight now that we're
totally
talking about it.
I absolutely believe that. You made me watch the 1.5 minute long trailer, and we had like an 1.5 hour long conversation about Elvis. So this gets started with you when you're 5 years old, right? Like pretty innocently, like I would imagine most people getting into music because of their parents, right? Isn't that how you got into it?
I got into it myself. So this is the big thing with me, and a lot of people have noticed this, and like my one buddy that I was an Eagle Scout with, he always told me that anything I get myself into, like anything, the reenacting, the cigars, Elvis.
You go ham.
I go ham.
There
I
is
go in
no
on-
middle ground for you.
Yeah.
And that is part of the reason why you've been able to build up so many of these great relationships, because you don't half-ass anything,
No.
including who you meet. It's just like,
Yeah,
yo,
so-
I'm Eric. This is me, man. Do
So
it.
the Elvis started, we were in New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey, and my dad took a job in Austin, Texas. So my dad was already there. It was my mom, my sister, who was 1 at the time, 1.5, and my cousin, Justin, who was 2 years older than me, and my aunt and my grandmother. So we took an RV down to Austin to meet my dad. And on the way, I mean, this is like a 3-4 day drive too. And we're in an RV with all of us. It's my mom's side of the family. And it's a little RV. So to have that many people and 3 young kids, because I was 5, my cousin was 7, my sister's 1.5. It's a lot of young kids to have with 3 women in an RV.
It's a long ride.
Yeah.
It's
so,
a long ride.
And on the way, my
For them.
Yeah, well, for them. For all of us. For all of us. We still all talk about that to this day. On the way, my grandmother saw a sign that said Graceland, and she's like, I've never been, I want to go. And my mom's like, all right, but like, why? And then we go, and it added another 5 hours to our trip.
Because you're tired.
Yeah, and my mom...
You're going up.
Yeah, my mom and Ann are like, what? Like, why? Like, this is adding like another 4 or 5 hours. Like,
And it's not worth it
like,
for a guy that worked outside of Memphis
So
and went. It's not worth
it
it.
started for... It is worth it.
It is not.
It's so worth it. If
Don't
you're an
make me get
Elvis
George
fan,
back here.
if you're an Elvis fan, it is worth it.
Okay, maybe.
If you're not an Elvis fan, no.
I like the guy. Like I don't
Yeah.
understand the obsession with it, but I've been to Graceland. I lived 10 minutes outside. when I
but
was
you
in
live there, so
Mississippi.
it's different.
I went there once. I was drunk, and I just wanted.
I mean, that's your first mistake, man.
I wanted to go to the Krispy Kreme that was down the road because the largest Krispy Kreme factory. I know that Charlotte is the headquarters for Krispy Kreme.
Didn't know that.
It is Charlotte. They were started in Winston-Salem. Now they're in Charlotte.
I'm not a Krispy Kreme guy.
I wanted to go to the factory because it was the largest one in
Yeah.
the country, and it's literally on the same road as
Yeah.
Graceland.
I'm not
So
a
I
Krispy
went to
Kreme guy.
Graceland. When I was when I was just found out that I had gotten the job in Mississippi, my mom and I flew down. She was in Raleigh. I was in Pennsylvania. We both met in Memphis, and we stayed at the Graceland Hotel. So like that was just because
It's not a hotel
it was
anymore.
easy.
They changed it.
Did they?
They did.
I mean, this is just 5 years ago.
Yeah,
so
they changed it.
They must have just changed it. But, you know, I did the Graceland tour, and it's not worth it because it's like, okay, you get to look at a bunch of his suits and his outfits and his records.
It's totally changed.
But if you pay like 25 extra bucks, then you can go look at his cars.
well, yeah,
if
naturally.
you pay 50 bucks more, you can look at his plane.
It's a cash grab.
It
I get
is.
it.
It is.
But like, so
But I mean, you talk
back
about
to that story, because, you know, you're trying to divulge people that Graceland's not worth it, but
I'm just telling you my experience.
And my experience was totally different because I've been 5.
You were 5.
I've been 5 times in my life.
To Graceland.
Yes. And I'm looking at going again this summer.
Get help.
Well, I'm long past help, and you should know that by now.
That's fair. That's fair.
So my grandmother didn't want to go in because it was a huge fight, and my aunt and mom were like,
Even though it was her idea
yeah,
to go
we're
5
like,
hours.
we're here. Like, why are we not going to go in? So my sister started crying. So my mom's like, I can't go in. I got to watch her. And I wasn't going to go in because I was like, at some dead guy's house. Like, why do I want
Whatever.
to go in? Yeah, 5 years old. And that was at the time, and my cousin will attest to this, that whatever my cousin did, I want to do what he did. And
He was 7, you're 5. I get that. The monkey see, monkey do.
And he was
attitude.
my
I get it.
close. He's still my closest cousin. Like we grew up together. Like we'd go to each other's house all the time. So he was going in. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go in. And I went in, and I still really can't explain what it was, but it was something in the house that I felt that I just instantly fell in love with Elvis. And
Okay.
I get to Texas, see my dad. I'm like, Dad, like we went to this house, Graceland. Like, oh my God, it was awesome. And he's like, it's gonna be a phase. Like it's not gonna last. And
How old are you now?
25.
So 20 years later.
20 years later.
It's not a face.
No, I tell my dad. He laughs all the time. He jokes. He's like, you were wrong. You proved me wrong. But my mom went to this Walmart and found in the Walmart movie box GI Blues. And he said, put that on. He'll hate him. I had an Elvis room. I had an Elvis birthday party.
It's the most random thing. Like, I
It
mean,
is.
you know, kids your age, like, well, I don't even know your age, but I'm thinking back to, like, the rooms that I had growing up. It was always sports figures.
I
It
had a
was
Civil War
always,
room.
like-
Okay? I had a Civil War room.
All
I'm
right.
not the typical person.
All right, I got a good question. Okay. So we talked about these 4 things, the 4 pillars of Eric Cosentino.
I don't have a
right?
cigar room.
Cigars, Elvis, the hockey and the Civil War, World War II reenactments, right? Do you have any tattoos?
No.
All right, you have to get one tattoo, gun to your head. Which one of those 4 categories are you picking?
I'm gonna throw you for a loop here. I wouldn't get a tattoo of any of those. I've told myself if I ever get a if I ever get a tattoo, it's gonna be on the back of my neck for the surgery I had when I was a kid.
Okay, what surgery was that?
It's called Arnold Chiari malformation.
Okay.
Essentially, my skull wasn't growing and my brain and spine were, so they had to take a piece of my skull out. So now I have a scar on the back of my head. And the common term for people it's called a zipper head. So people that have had that surgery get a little zipper at the bottom of their scar.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Why is that not your nickname? Like you have Ellen and Sevens.
Because I don't really talk about my
Zipperhead
surgery.
is badass.
I don't really talk about my surgery unless people ask.
Is there a band called Zipperhead? If not,
no.
Trademark. Because I want that. I'm speaking dibs on that. That's pretty cool. All right, good. See, because most people get it around,
And I don't
want to say pop culture
if I got one, you know how it is. You get one, you want to get a couple. I'm sure I would get an Elvis or like a Civil War one, that kind of thing. Or I'd get one that my grandfather, he always said I had a heart of a lion, so I'd get something like that.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of thing. But,
all right. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap everything up. We talk a little bit about, you couldn't imagine what you'd be doing if it weren't for hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next?
I don't know.
What's next for Eric Cosentino?
Honestly, man, I just take it day by day.
You don't have a 5-year plan.
Nope.
You don't have like a I hope one day. You don't have an
I mean, I
goal.
hope one day I'm in the NHL.
Okay.
That's obviously the ultimate goal for.
You're in the American Hockey League, so theoretically that's the next step, right?
Yeah, 95% of equipment managers, that's obviously ultimately the goal. But I don't know. I mean, when I was in the ECHL, my goal was to be in the American League. It was to be an assistant in the American League, and I've done that. I don't know what my next step is. Maybe I go back to the ECHL to be a head equipment manager. Maybe I stay in the AHL and become a head equipment manager. Maybe I go to the NHL and be a third guy. I really don't know.
It all depends on what the offer is and when it comes.
Yeah, I'm happy where I am. I love Charlotte. I've made a lot of great relationships with people here, and I'm 6 hours from my parents' house, so it's not far. It's far enough that I can go home when I want. And, we go to Hershey. All of my family comes, so that's always cool. It's always cool for me.
Friends, I remember in Hershey, you had some friends come down.
I had 20
pre-warm-ups.
people. I had 20 people to one game.
Yeah.
That part's always cool. So it's I'm not in a rush or anything. I'm at where I wanted to be. So now it's just kind of you take it day by day and see what.
Just keep getting better, keep getting better.
See what happens.
Totally get it.
I'm not in a rush.
See, this is the beauty of conversation. This is the beauty of this podcast. You get to meet people along your journey.
I think this podcast is a great idea. When you first asked me about it, I was like, yeah, sure.
Because you've never been on a podcast.
Well, that's
popping your cherry right here.
Yeah, I've never been on a podcast, but I didn't think I would be.
Cheers.
I'm drinking a bottle of water. But I never thought I would be. But I'm not I've had a relationship. You and I've had plenty of talks about people and my weird interests and hobbies. I don't know many.
Everybody's hobbies are weird when you think about it.
Yeah, but I don't know many people. I know people, but outside of the reenacting world, I don't know a lot of people that would be willing to get dressed up in wool clothes.
I don't either.
Yeah, I mean, the World War II reenactment, which shout out to the Greatest Generation Living History Association. That's my group. I don't know a lot of people that would go to Reading, Pennsylvania for 4 days and get dressed up as a GI and sit in an airport tarmac and sweat.
I wouldn't. I was living in Minnesota where the temperature was lower than Antarctica, and I wasn't wearing wool. You can bet your ass I was not itching my... And you guys are doing this in the summer.
Man, I did a 17-mile march one time. I did it. It was...
I don't know that I've walked 17 miles collectively in my 35 years on Earth.
But that one... that was honestly a really cool experience. It was a huge group of people that I know from Civil War. They do it every year. They do the AP Hill March. AP Hill was in Harper's Ferry, and Battle of Antietam was starting. Lee said, hey, I need your entire division here as fast as possible. So they literally went from Harper's Ferry. They requisitioned a bunch of Union supplies and went from Harper's Ferry to Antietam in one day, 17 miles, crossed the Potomac River, and went right into a battle. So I knew people that did it, and 3 of my other buddies in my Civil War group were going to do it. And I was like, I want to do this. And I was in high school. I was a junior or senior. And at the time, you think you're in the best shape of your life. You can do it. You're fine.
I probably was in the best shape of my life in high school.
I can tell you nothing prepares you for that. You need to really do that. I finished there was a lot of guys that dropped out. Like, it's tough. Like, it's a lot of hills. It's a lot of up and down. You're wearing the full leather. You're wearing or full wool leather shoes, carrying a rifle. It's tough. But
and listening to Elvis in your AirPods.
No AirPods. I was just walking. Like I literally had nothing modern on me. I was in full kit, just walking. And
That's crazy.
I was in the back most of the time with my buddy Mark, and I'm going to send him this because he'll want to listen. I was in the back with my buddy Mark, and we just joked the entire time that him and I were taking our time. And they were yelling at, like, in the beginning, like, we were walking in formation, and we were slowing up, and the leader was like, you guys need to pick it up. And my buddy Mark goes, F you, I'm not picking it up.
Tortoise and the hare, right?
Oh, yeah. We were the tortoise.
Exactly.
Like, at one point, he was like, I'm going to tell the chase cars to stop so I can tie my shoe. And he's like, it's just so we can get a break. Because you stopped it. You'd walk for 50 minutes, stop for 10. Okay, and then at the halfway point, you stop for like a half hour, 45 minutes. But
that's a lot, man.
And the last, like, they tell you it's the last 1.7 miles. It ain't. It's like the last 3 miles are literally straight uphill. And you're chafing, you're wet because you just crossed the Potomac River. And the minute I hit the end point at the Antietam battlefield, like, it was just a sigh of relief, and I was exhausted. And then I went and got ice cream, and it was worth it. But to me, doing what I do with that, like, especially World War II, I'm doing it because those guys were a different breed. Like, they went right into a battle after that.
Yeah.
Like, there's me lying on the ground going to get ice cream. These guys
with
went,
all of our modern, you know, like the way we're raised.
Like, even World War II, like, my great-grandfather was in World War II. He was in the Army Air Force. So, like, a lot of me wanting to do World War II was through him because he died when I was 3 months old.
Yeah, even that, 4 generations is impressive.
So a lot of that for me was wanting to do it because of him. And I don't do an Army Air Force impression because there's not much you can do with that. But I do a GI impression, and I've met GIs and listened to their stories. Like the one, he was in the 94th Infantry, and that's what my group mostly portrays. We do various units, but that was the one we all really started with. And we were at Reading, and he came down to us and was telling us stories. And I will remember this. Like, people can give me compliments in my job and my knowledge, but hearing from an actual World War II vet that I looked like exactly how he did during the war, that is the biggest compliment I can ever get. You can get it from a spectating, like, wow, you guys look legit. Like, you look
but they
like
don't
the real
necessarily
deal.
know.
But when an actual guy comes up to you and says, hey, you looked exactly how I did when I was 19 years old in the war.
It's like, that vindication that you're only going to get from someone who's been there.
Yeah, and the stories he told me, like, it's utmost appreciation for any veteran, like, anybody, but, like, my utmost appreciation. And that's why, for me, like, doing the reenactments, like, I love my job. I don't get to do the reenactments as much as I'd like, but what I get out of it, like, you know, when you're at a reenactment, a little kid comes up to you, because I remember being that little kid going to a reenactment, seeing it, them seeing that spark in their eyes of like, wow, this is so cool. Like, but then, you know, you're sitting talking with a World War II vet, and he's telling you about how during the Battle of the Bulge, he didn't sleep in a bed for 7 months. And that was the first time he slept in a bed was a cot. And he had 2 pairs of socks the entire war. Like, that, to me, like, I will never get to that point, and no matter what I do with reenacting, but to hear that, it's like, holy shit, like, this guy's seen and done some shit. Like, and I don't know if I told you this, I'm trying to go to France next year.
For what, the Normandy?
Yeah, they're doing, my couple buddies of my group have done it before. They do a World War II reenactment in Europe. They do them various times. They do different ones, different battles, and you go for like 2 weeks. Week of it is just the reenactment.
Oh, I would imagine, I mean, theoretically, assuming the season's over, June is...
It's going to be, well, they're going to do it end of July, beginning of August, so it's perfect timing.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm trying, it's the 80th anniversary of Normandy.
Lift the Calder Cup, go to France. What a great year that would be.
Great year.
Man, you are filled with some great stories. You are filled with just great emotion and passion.
A lot of random knowledge.
I know we touched on the big four, and that's kind of like the point that I've been trying to drive home this whole podcast. I know we keep reaching on that, but you're a lot deeper than that, and that's the why you connect with everybody from Dan Bilesma, a Stanley Cup winning, gold medal winning coach, all the way down to the ECHL rookies that are coming into the Charlotte Checkers. Or when you were in the ECHL, I'm sure you saw some SPHL guys come up. Dylan Fox is one guy that
Foxy.
we both know.
That's my
He's
boy.
Awesome. Speaking of Hummelstown, you dropped his hometown earlier.
I did, yeah.
But, you know, that's what makes you Eric, and that's what makes the Charlotte Checkers the Charlotte Checkers. I mean, on the back end, you guys, there's so many personalities in that locker room.
I mean, that can also
You
attest
fit
to
right
the relationship I have with Michael Kahn.
Yeah, very much so.
Like, I have a very close relationship with him because he's also a big Elvis fan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He's a big Elvis fan.
I didn't know that.
Him
okay.
and I have had a lot of conversations about Elvis. But,
right.
like, the relationship I have with him, too, is, like, awesome. Like, I got to go on his jet to a Georgia game.
Nice.
Which was cool.
Very cool.
That was really cool.
I knew he was a big Georgia Bulldog fan.
He's an
Obviously,
Elvis fan.
as we're big Eagles fans,
Yes,
we got to
go
be
Birds.
talking about the Georgia Bulldogs,
That's
right? I mean, we're half of our roster. At
I
this
literally
point.
went up to him and I was like, "Are you becoming an Eagles fan now?" He goes, "I kind of have to."
I know.
I was like,
I
"Go Birds."
absolutely know it. But man, I thank you so much for the
Hey, man.
time. This was a lot of fun getting to know you. But
It was a
this
lot
is
of rambling.
exactly this is exactly what this show is about. And look, if you're out there and you're wondering what's it like in sports, Chillin' with Chillot. This is the unfiltered look at life inside of sports, the people inside of sports that make the world go around
got more
and
into
bring
the-
you the entertainment.
We got
So,
more into the big four than we did hockey, but that's fine.
That's fine. This isn't a hockey podcast. There's thousands of those out there.
There are.
Thank you so much for tuning in. My guest today, Eric Cosentino, the assistant equipment manager with the Charlotte Checkers. My name is TJ Chillot, play-by-play broadcaster. Thankful for you joining us here on Chillin' with Chillot.